Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the Imago Nutrition Podcast, where we answer your questions and give you practical nutrition strategies so that you and your family can flourish. And speaking of families flourishing, we have a terrific question today on the topic of family and child nutrition. And so, of course, those of you that know us know I will not be doing nearly as much talking as I normally do because I am not the expert in the family and child arena. And so Danielle is with me. Hello, Danielle. It's been a little while since we've done one together, right? So we're back together. You have to put up with me for another episode. But how's things up in the St. Louis area?
Great. Very good. Yes, I love fall.
I know. Fall is in full swing. And so we're recording this we're recording it on Halloween. And so we're about a week out. So this will probably post the second week of November in 2022. And we woke up to a foggy fall morning, which is really nice. We're obviously in the Nashville area. We have a lot of sun, but we have a nice little foggy fall this morning, but still kind of a little drizzly and kind of just nice. All the leaves are falling and changing, of course. So it's a fun time of year. So with that, we have a terrific question. If you have a question for us, by the way, you can always submit those questions. And we will consider all the submissions for possible future topics on the podcast. So if you're listening to this, you've got that burning question, you've got that question from that friend down the street that said something about nutrition that you're curious about and you'd like to verify it through us, we'd be happy to do that. Anything we can help you with, we are here. That's why we do the podcast for free, is to help. And so with that, if you do have a question, you can head over to imagonutrition.com/podcast. That's imago, imago.com, imagonutrition.com/podcast. Scroll down just a bit on that page. You'll see a web form there. You can submit your question to us, again, for consideration as a future podcast episode topic. And so we'd love to hear from you. We love these questions that are coming in and getting a chance to help people from around the country, around the world. And so feel free to shoot us a question if you've got one. So with that, speaking of terrific questions, Catherine in California has a great question for us on the topic of family and child nutrition. And so Catherine in California, if you're listening to this, thank you for the question. She asks, what do I do if my kids want to eat a diet heavy on fruits and carbs? Again, what do I do if my kids want to eat a diet heavy on fruits and carbs? And so I'll start just by saying, I don't want to read too much into this question, but before I turn it over to you, Danielle, we're going to assume that Catherine does not believe carbs are bad. Okay, that only eating fruits and carbs are bad. The question is about the limited nutrients, right? It's just the fact that the child or the kids are honing in on fruits and carbs. Not that, oh my gosh, they're eating carbs and it's bad. It's that they're only eating fruits and carbs, and what are the implications for that? And so with that clarification, again, we're not going to make a defense of carbs in this episode and say, no, carbs are great, which they are, by the way. They're terrific. Fruits, terrific. Carbs are great. It's our body's primary source of energy, or preferred source of energy. It does a wide range of good for the body, even including right down to the central nervous system. Carbohydrates are important. They're a macronutrient. However, as I said, we're not going to lay out with the assumption that she believes carbs are bad. It's just that the kids want to eat predominantly carbs and predominantly fruit. And so with that, Danielle, I think you got a couple points, and we're going to kind of talk through this. And I'm curious your thoughts on this per Catherine's question.
It is a great question. I think one thing to think about that might make this a little different, depending on the age of your kids. So thinking about younger kids and older kids. With older kids, you can kind of do a little more education as far as if you're hungry, we need foods that help us feel full. Carbohydrates can help us feel full, but mainly when they have protein or fiber in them. So just that is one thing to think about, is what are the age of your kids, and how you can, kind of have a good approach to this. So I did actually start with my, some of the things to remember as parents. I feel like in the diet culture, parents do get fed that carbs are bad.
Let's do it. Let's defend carbs. I take it back.
Okay, I was going to say, can I spend just a tiny bit of time?
No, let's do it. And this is proof that, look, we get together and we have honest conversations at the speed of time. And so, so let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Okay. So in parents' mindset, we just need to recognize the benefits of fruits and carbs. Fruits, I feel like I get a lot of questions about this because we're concerned about not getting enough vegetables. And there are actually the same really good vitamins and minerals in your fruits. So I think we tend to forget about that because we're so concerned about them not getting enough vegetables. So fruits obviously have tons of vitamins and minerals, and their color has a plant pigment that is an antioxidant. So all the colors are great. There's no bad fruits. Like, for example, any of your purple fruits or vegetables give you anthocyane, and that's great for memory. And each of those different plant pigments have different benefits, whether it's heart health or memory or things like that. Fruits have a ton of fiber, so they can help us feel full. They are naturally sweet, so there's no added sugar. And so they can help address the sweet tooth and help you feel full because they have the fiber and water involved. So it is an all natural. If you're choosing a fresh or frozen fruit, it's an all natural sugar. Nothing is added. So that is what the American Heart Association is not telling us to decrease. We're not needing to decrease our amount of fruit by any means. And so, yes, I think in this question, we want to just briefly recognize that, you just don't want too much energy. And that's probably what more of the question is about, is too much carbs and not enough of the other foods. So the second point would just be to incorporate complex carbs more often. So when you're having a family meal, trying to think about what carbohydrates are highest in fiber, and those are typically those that are complex. So that means it takes longer for your body to digest them, decrease spike in blood sugar, helps you feel satisfied longer. So these might be sweet potatoes, squash, beans and lentils, quinoa, oats, and there are plenty more. But if you can find a carbohydrate has fiber and or protein, so this could help increase plant-based protein at your meal. So like I said, depending on the age of the kids, some kids really have to take time to learn to like meat. Well, especially all children, they have to learn how to like all new foods when you're introducing food. So the carbohydrates that have protein, could be a side dish so that they're still getting protein, like quinoa or beans or lentils. Yogurt for breakfast could be a good carbohydrate with protein. And you can put quinoa in like baked oatmeal. So that could also give you a spike in protein. Or you can incorporate other plant-based proteins that don't have carbohydrates as much, as like tofu, nuts, nut butters, edamame, things like that. Edamame has a little carbs, but so incorporating those complex carbs will give us that fullness that we're feeling, which is what we're worried about when we're having a diet heavy in fruits and carbs. Did you want to say anything on that, Mark? No,
I love it. I'm listening. I'm learning.
Okay. The other thought I had for this would be the education piece. We don't want to keep our kids in the dark. We want them to, learn about how to take care of their bodies, but we don't want to do that in a non-pressure way. So I recommend not educating your kids at the dinner table or at meal times. It could be in the car. Maybe you are driving by a restaurant. It spikes your memory of this topic or this podcast, or part of a homework assignment. Maybe you're like, well, check in what your kids are learning in science or health class. Or maybe when they're playing an activity, when we eat protein, we're going to be really strong to be able to lift this, I don't know, or kick this soccer ball farther or there whatever it might be. Yep. Throw that basketball higher. So yeah, making it important to them. kids take a lot of time to build interest in taking care of their health. They are not necessarily thinking that, depending on their age. So what kind of interest do your kids have in incorporating at that time? Not having any of that diet mentality. When you're talking about healthy foods, try not to use the word healthy. Try not to use the word healthy or good for you. That kind of creates a negative relationship with food. So it gives you a good list of foods and a bad list of foods. So when we think about this, we want to be specific when we're talking about foods. Like when you're really young, age like 0 to 3, you would say like green foods help us fight off sickness, or, yogurt helps us with our bones, gives us strong bones. So being as specific as you can and trying as best you can not to have any good foods and healthy foods, words, and being specific. So I would say another way to think about this is by not just using your words and educating them away from the dinner table, but being an example at the table. So them watching you eat the protein, them watching you eat the vegetables is the best way that you're going to learn. But really, there can't be any pressure at the table, especially if picky eaters are at the table. And then just providing as all the way up until adolescence, you're still the provider of the meal. So if you're providing that balanced plate, a fourth of your plate protein, a fourth of your plate carbohydrates, half your plate of veggies. If you're providing that day in and day out and you're just patient, it'll take time. But being willing to try some plant-based proteins, having a meatless Monday, getting on their level or talking to them outside of the meal, again, maybe at the grocery store, having them pick a vegetable that they want to try, or having them pick a protein that they want to try, and cooking together, or going to a place where you can meal prep or cook together, like a cooking class. So these are some thoughts I had. So incorporating those complex carbohydrates, educating without pressure away from the dinner table or meal time, and then being the example is the 3 tips I have for today.
That's awesome. That's cool. And, I had just like a couple thoughts too, but very quickly. You did a far more eloquent job than I will on this topic, no surprise. But as I grow in this area as a parent, as a nutrition nerd, just a couple thoughts is that, one, just keeping in mind, you mentioned patience, that the child's nutrition patterns change over time, right? And so a lot of times as parents, we put arbitrary, I say that kindly, arbitrary expectations on our children, and we put advanced expectations, right? And I love what you said about the parents, because that was one of my final thoughts too. But one, we tend to place adult expectations on children, okay? And that likely comes from a good place, wanting the best for your kids, yes. But patience is hard, and not placing adult expectations on children is hard, because we want the best for them, of course. And we know, Catherine, that you want the best for the kids, and that's why you've got concern in this area. But as Danielle said, that patience is really, really key. And being careful not to place, kind of developed expectations on kids as they're developing. The other thing I would say too is that keep in mind, and we don't know the duration, we don't know the full context of, your children's eating patterns over time, but also just keep in mind that one meal is not necessarily a good snapshot of their nutrition as a whole. In fact, one day isn't even a good snapshot of their nutrition as a whole. I have days where I have a lot of carbs. I work with adult, clients in our nutrition business. Like I have a marathon running mom as a client. We ramp her up to, before race, she's eating 75% carbohydrates, right? Now that's on a cycle, and that's training that's developed, and it's part of her plan and her goal. But I don't train for marathons, but I have very high carbohydrate days and somewhat lower carbohydrate days. And I'm not carb cycling or anything like that. Some of it's intentional, because I still play old man over 40 soccer, right? And so some days I'm loading up carbs the day before a soccer match. But there's some days where I just am enjoying more carbohydrates than other days. And I know this because I'm looking at my nutrition. So all that's to say, keep in mind too, that you want to think about the average intake over time, whether that's a few days, a week, even over the months. And so not just looking at any individual meal and being like, oh my gosh, they're only eating carbs, but what have they consumed that entire week? And then remembering to be patient as that child's nutrition patterns change. And Danielle, I can't remember if you said it. I'm a marketing guy, so I like things when they sound nice and are short and concise. I'm pretty sure you probably said it, or perhaps I've read it or come across something. But the thing that sticks in my mind that I'm learning too is that parents provide, children decide, right? So remember, your role is that parents provide and then the children decides. And so that goes into that. And my final point too was on the modeling, because I work with almost exclusively adults. And a lot of times what adults need to be honest about is that they perhaps are not modeling very well for their children. Again, they have undue expectations. They've got these arbitrary expectations. The kid has to eat really well. And then I like to ask the parents, how's your nutrition going? You know, and not because I'm a smart aleck, but because I care. And because I don't want that kid to be under so much pressure while the parent is not taking their modeling role seriously as well. So remember that as a parent, your job is to provide. Again, Danielle's done a lot of, we've done several episodes where we get deeper into this, and there will certainly be more in the future. But remember those roles is that your job is to provide. And then the hard part is we have to release some of that responsibility to the child. Okay. Your responsibility is to provide, let the child decide. And then remembering, there's another adage that says, that lessons are caught, not taught. And so your child is catching things from watching that modeling more so than they're receiving things that are being directly taught. So definitely have conversations, everything that Danielle said, work it into conversations outside of the table, outside of that environment, so that it releases some of the pressure. It keeps them interested in what's good for them. But at the same time, remembering that more is caught than taught. And so ultimately take a look, have a bit of an introspection moment, take a look at your own nutritional habits, your own nutritional patterns. And when they see you enjoying well-balanced, nutrient dense, again, we don't say healthy foods, nutrient dense foods. I had ice cream last night. It's not nutrient dense, but it was part of my nutrition context, and that's okay. It was Sunday night. I can do that, right? So when they see you enjoying a wide array of nutrient dense foods, day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, that is ultimately, I think, what's going to be the best instruction for them. So Those are my thoughts.
That was good. I just want to go back to your first one. That was really good.
That's good.
I mean, you had really good ones. You did.
I try. I'm learning from Danielle.
No, the first one reminded me that I think we also have a higher expectation on protein specifically. I think for parents, we're trying to think about, maybe increasing our protein, but really, if you think about it, the kids' requirement for protein is really quite small. Like toddlers, I think it's 14 grams a day. Like that's 2 eggs. Totally. It's really small. So if you think about, some dietitians on is it Pinterest? No, it's Instagram.
I think you almost said Pinstagram. I think we should create Pinstagram.
They have a really great picture of like a kid's plate, and it's like, okay, so just full of blueberries on this side and just maybe 2 carrots or, 1 piece of chicken. Okay. So like that's without pressure, like letting the kid choose, like you said. And just remembering like that small amount of protein they're getting with each meal, they probably get what they're probably getting what they need. And
for context, right? Like a full chicken breast, you mentioned the eggs, which is about 6 grams per whole egg, by the way. And that's mostly the proteins contained in the whites. But then like a chicken breast, you'd be like, oh, if my kid would just eat a chicken breast, depending on the size, of course, that's like 24, 25, 28 grams, depending on the size and the cut. Like that's a lot. That could be 2 days worth for a child. And keep in mind that protein, again, very important. We've talked about it, comes in a variety of sources. So it doesn't have to be some of those normal, I got to go to eggs for protein. I got to go to a big old chicken breast right? There are those plant-based sources, which we are all for. And keep in mind that too, that the numbers are just not that much. They don't have that much muscle mass that needs to be fueled. Protein is important for many things, enzymes, hormone production, lots and lots and lots. However, it's a small little body they've got. Okay. So they don't have that same requirement that we do. So that's a great point. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay. So myplate.gov will give you, like, based on your kid's age, if you want to see that number. I think that's really helpful for parents. That's just the same reason why I talked about the fruit does give us fruits and vitamins and minerals, just like our vegetables do. So we can have some reassurance, in this learning process while we're being patient. It just helps parents with patience, I think, to know the good and what's going on. So
absolutely. Awesome. Well, that was fun. It was fairly short. I think we got through it, but I hope it's super helpful, Catherine, and to everyone else listening too. And so any final words as I wrap us up, Danielle, on this? And I'm glad that I started the whole thing by saying we weren't going to defend carbs. And then you were like, actually, we are a little bit. So that just shows, we're trying to be candid over here. So because we didn't talk about it ahead of time, we're like, we got the topic. Let's compare notes. Let's do it. And I'm up here like, well, we're not going to do this. Well, I think we might a little bit.
Just a tiny
That's
bit.
good. Anytime we can defend carbs these days, it's a good day because they get a lot of bad rap. And so I do think that was an important start, was to remember, there are definitely, though we never want to have a reductive mindset, there are worse things than a child wanting to eat a lot of fruit. I'll tell you that, because fruit's great. And so, great question, Catherine. Any final thoughts, Danielle?
I don't think so.
Very cool. All right. Well, with that, if you found this episode helpful, we would, of course, love it if you subscribe so that you're automatically notified of our future episodes. Drop a review. Let us know how we're doing. Share with a friend. If you've got some mom friends, some dad friends that have these questions, they've got their kids. Kids tend to gravitate toward, something or other, whether it's carbs, fruit, something else. Hopefully this episode is helpful for them. So do us a favor and share it with them. If you're on social media, again, we're going to try to create an app called Pinstagram based off Danielle's idea. And so she owns that. We're going to copyright that this afternoon. But if you're on any of the current social media, you can follow us at Imago Nutrition. That's IMAGO Nutrition, at Imago Nutrition. And as always, we'd like to thank Happy Pill, the band that provided us with our theme song, Thinkin Bout Food, because on the Imago Nutrition podcast, we're always thinking about food.